Okay, thanks very much. I hope everybody can hear me. I had a slight anxious moment with my internet. So, good afternoon. Welcome to this How to Mark the Controlled Assessments in Speaking for GCSE German. My name's Janet Searle, as you've heard. My role is that I'm the principal moderator for the Controlled Assessments in German. And some people I've already met, both virtually and in the flesh, as it were, and for those that I haven't, well, hi. So today then we're going to focus on exactly what it says about how to mark the speaking controlled assessments, and our objectives really for today are to get to grips or to understand and apply the marking criteria. And so we're going to start off really with a bit of an activity which tries to unpick the assessment criteria and wants you to sort of focus on various aspects of those, and I'll explain those in a mo. We're going to listen to some recordings, definitely 3, possibly 4, depending on time. So definitely 4, and you will definitely 3 rather, and you will have the possibility of downloading these samples and getting the various materials at the end. We're going to obviously do some polls, a bit like the ones that John showed you at the beginning about whether you could hear the sound, and these will, I'll broadcast the results of those, and by doing that you'll be able to compare your marks with the marks of your colleagues. You'll also then be able to, I'll tell you what the marks were, so you'll be able to check your marks against those that were awarded to these candidates. And then at the end, we're going to have a small activity looking at a controlled assessment task and evaluating that. So those are our objectives for today, and so really just there's a lot of points here, but to sum up, so by the end of today's session you should be able to understand the criteria and apply them to the nationally agreed standard, and understand how we interpret and apply the assessment criteria, and look then also at how to begin setting a task that is a good one. Okay, so to that end we're going to start with activity 1, and I'm going to move the screen around now. So in this activity we're going to as I said, be looking at the assessment criteria, but I don't want you to look at the full assessment criteria. I've picked out some specific bits, and what you've got on the screen in front of you then is an open interaction task, which you can see at the top there, and you have control of this document, so you can go up and down and scroll around and do what you want. And then underneath you've got the transcript, and what I would like you to do is to focus on 3 aspects really of the grid, and you should see at the bottom of the screen the 3 polls. And I want you, simply based on what you have read, to decide which criterion within the information related to the visual topic or stimulus you feel best describes this performance. And then similarly, in terms of interaction, you've got a list of different criteria, and I'd like you again to just decide which of those criteria you feel, which one of those criteria you feel best describes the interaction that you can perceive in that transcript. And then finally, thinking about ideas and points of view, which of those criteria you feel best describes the performance. So I'm going to give you a bit of time to do that. What you need to remember is that we don't know what you're voting, so just vote. Select which of the criteria you think is appropriate, and then when I broadcast, it's all anonymous. So I'm going to give you a couple of moments to read through that and make your decision, and then I'm going to give you a few clues about what we felt about this before we progress to the next stage. Okay, so off you go. Okay, we've had quite a few people have given their votes, so I think we'll start to have a look at those. So Mel, if you could just expand, please, the poll that says related. Thank you. The information related to the visual topical stimulus. I'm going to broadcast the results, so you should all be able to see what people felt about this performance in terms of how much information, how detailed and relevant the information was that the candidate gave. And I think it's quite interesting there to see that most people have gone for relevant but some omissions. But a few have decided that it's detailed and relevant. And I think the key word here to pick out is that both of those criteria have the word relevant in them. And all the information that the candidate gives is in fact relevant, and that's very important. It's relevant to the topic, it's relevant to the situation, relevant to the task. And I think we would agree that it's not detailed, but I think also we would say it's difficult to state that there are any omissions because the candidate had quite an open-ended task, and she has in fact sort of fulfilled, if you like, the terms of that task, because everything the teacher has asked her, the teacher as the tourist as it were, she has managed to respond to. So we actually felt that this was the right kind of area, that it was relevant. It wasn't at all detailed, but in fact there weren't really any omissions. So when you're starting to decide on your mark, you've got to sort of go for a best fit, haven't you, really? And so what you can say here is that the detailed and relevant belongs in the 12 to 15 band, and the relevant but some omissions falls in the 8 to 11 band. So actually this candidate is sort of at this stage somewhere at the top of the 8 to 11 or at the bottom of the 12 to 15, and you're going to go through the criteria to decide whereabouts would be the best fit for this candidate. So if we then go on to the next grid, Mel, please, can you go on to the grid for interaction? Can you expand that one for me as well so I can show that? Thank you. I'm going to broadcast the results there. And we've got a slight broadening of opinion, but I think we would all agree that the bulk of the decision here rests with interacts well, and I think that is absolutely the case, that this candidate interacts quite well with, very well really, with the teacher in many cases, that the teacher asks very sort of spontaneous questions, and the candidate is able to respond all the time to those, and you don't feel really that there is a lot of pre-learnt material, so the candidate was expecting specific questions and coming out with very specific information, that there is this element of interaction. So what you have here then, obviously the interacts very well is in the top band, and I think that this isn't a very well, there is scope for this to improve, but there is more, I think, than just some interaction. So we go with the majority vote here, that she interacts well with the teacher examiner, and this puts her in the 12 to 15 band. That's the criterion from the 12 to 15 band. So you can start again or you get an extra sort of piece in your jigsaw, if you like, that you're building up a picture of how this candidate is performing. Can we go to the third poll, please, Mel, which is about ideas and points of view. If you could expand that one for me as well. Okay, I'll broadcast the results for you there. So we have a slightly greater distribution of opinion on her opinions here. So the majority have gone for the opinions but rarely expands. And the opinions but rarely expands puts this candidate in the 8 to 11 band. And I think that this actually is exactly the descriptor that matches her performance. This is the criterion that matches her performance. She does give some opinion, and there are one or two instances perhaps where she does expand, but generally she just gives das ist sehr populär mit die Teenager, es ist teuer, oh, das ist perfekt. There's not really very much expansion. In fact, in many cases, there's none at all. And it really is as well, for those guys that sort of tick the one above with explaining ideas and points of view. For me, there are not really any ideas and points of view. It is just more of an opinion. So I think that criterion there, opinions, she gives some opinions, but she rarely expands, is actually spot on. So you can see then you've got in your first grid you had that she was sort of somewhere between the 8 to 11 and the 12 to 15. In your second one, to do with the interaction, she was more in the 12 to 15, and here for the ideas and points of view she's more in the 8 to 11. So keep that in mind, and we're going to progress to the next section of the activity, where I want you to think about spontaneity and unpredictable elements. And you've got, you should be able to see on your screen 2 text boxes where you can just write your opinions. If you've got any thoughts about how spontaneous she is, or how unpredictable the questions are, you can just write a few notes there. And also, if you think there is anything that is an elaborate response, a more expanded, extended response, you can write that in there. Now, if it helps you, you've got, I put numbers, as it were, next to the utterances. So you could actually just say, oh, number 3 is an excellent example of spontaneity, but you can write it all out if you like. Okay, so again, I'm going to give you a few modes, and you should be able to read all of those comments, and I'll pick up on a few as I come back in. I hope everything's clear. If not, just let me know. Okay, I'm going to pick up on some of those comments. Kelly, you said that you've written there that you felt she knew what questions were coming. Now, I think one of the good things here is that the task is very open-ended, so it would be very difficult for the candidate to know for sure how that conversation was going to develop. And I think we don't have any feeling, or I would suggest we don't have any sort of suspicion, if you like, that the candidate is reciting huge chunks of material. So spontaneous really is that the teacher goes with the flow. The candidate says something and the teacher will build on that. That's really what we're looking at for spontaneity, that the teacher isn't following a set pattern of questions, but is going to listen to what the candidate says and then respond appropriately by asking a question that sort of picks up on that. And I would suggest that the teacher does that here. So, for example, if you were to look at utterance 22, you should be able to move this. But the candidate says, for example, es gibt eine Kunstgalerie in der Stadtmitte und es ist ein Dom, ein sehr alter Dom, and the teacher then sort of picks up on that business of the Stadtmitte. Oh, und wie kann man eigentlich in die Stadt fahren? So obviously she wants her to give the information about travelling, but that actually ties in very well. That is a spontaneous question responding to a spontaneous response by the candidate, answer by the candidate. Now, some of you have said, obviously, it's very difficult to determine spontaneity without hearing it. That's why we're only going to do one of these from the transcript method. But I think it gives you just an idea when you've got it written in front of you. Gives you an idea of how that sort of flows quite naturally, and given that the conversation is not structured via the role play task, via the open interaction task, it is quite sort of fluid. Now, again, sorry, I don't know what your name is. C methyl. I hope that's right. You've not. You said it's a predictable situation anyway, but that's fine because this is what they will have been taught, and this is obviously then what the teacher wants them to show that they can do. So we're not saying that it shouldn't be a predictable situation. The spontaneity is to do with it being a natural conversation, and unpredictable questions will mean obviously then that the candidate won't know for sure what's coming, but there we are, she knows that it's going to be based on what she has said. And you're quite right, Kelly, that the pauses, the hesitation stuff, that's important, and we're obviously going to be looking at that and thinking about that when we listen to the samples in a mo. So I think there are quite a lot of examples in here of spontaneity and unpredictable responses, and the candidate is able to sort of respond to everything that is put her way. Now, for the elaborate and expanded responses, you've all focused on 20, which is absolutely correct. And one of the things I wanted to show you here really was that when we talk about elaborate responses, it doesn't really have to be hugely long. It's not a monologue. It is a response that goes beyond the bare minimum. And in fact, there are perhaps a couple of these, and I'm going to sort of flick onto the next page. If you look at, for example, 34, if you look at response 34, so having been asked, ja, wie ist das Wetter normalerweise? Normalerweise es ist okay, aber letztes Jahr. So she's showing initiative, she's giving a bit of extra information. That is then a more elaborate response, a more extended response. And similarly, if you look at the was kann man machen, so es ist ein großes Kaufhaus, not just ein Kaufhaus, but ein großes Kaufhaus. So that's a bit of expansion there in die nächste Stadt, und die Sportzentrum auch. So she's given you extra bit of info about the Kaufhaus and then another activity there. So I think there are we need to understand it within the context of what the candidate says. Is that an elaborate response, i.e. does the candidate go beyond the actual bare minimum? So if you then think about an overall mark for that, you've said then that before in our activity we said, well, it's sort of nudging between the top of the 8 to 11 and the bottom of the 12 to 15. We're saying here that actually there are some examples of initiative and more elaborate responses, which means that she's going into the 12 to 15 band. And we're also saying that in fact that it is quite spontaneous and she is able to deal with these unpredictable elements. So you will have the recording of this candidate in your pack, and I can tell you that we gave this candidate for the content and response a mark of 12. We felt that it was on that sort of cusp area, but there was enough to push her into the 12 to 15 band. Okay, so we've had quite a few votes. So I'm going to ask Mel if you're able to make the vocabulary box a bit bigger for me, please, so that I can see what's going on. I'm going to broadcast the results straight away, but if you want to, if you're tempted to vote still, please do. So the majority vote here is saying that the range of vocab is adequate but predictable, and that's exactly what it is. It is absolutely adequate for her to carry out the task, but there is nothing really that is more adventurous than just predictable. So that criterion there, adequate but predictable, falls in the 3 to 4 band. So you've got your starting point really for your range of language mark. So it's not at all basic or limited. It's not particularly repetitive. It's adequate, but that there's nothing particularly adventurous about it. So I think we would I would go with that majority vote there. Well, I know I would. Okay, so if we can bring up the second grid, Mel, please, which is the structures and subordination. If you could make that one a bit bigger for me as well, that would be great. Okay, so I'm going to, we haven't had too many votes in here, but, oh, not bad actually. So again, you can see, I have broadcast them for you, so you can see where the majority opinion lies. It's with the adequate but predictable and some subordination. Now, I think that she doesn't use subordination here. Leastways, I've not really been able to find any in German. She uses one in English in line 4, for example. If you look there, she uses the word which obviously is in English. So so for subordination, Kelly, you said the obvious ones would, yes, be vile. Obwohl isn't an obvious one. Obwohl would actually be quite a good one. So the very obvious one that is used by the vast majority of candidates would be vile. And the more they sort of add to those, if you like, the das, wenn, obwohl, obgleich, perhaps, whatever, those then improve their performance. So the sort of high frequency one, if I can use that term, would be vile, and then all the others would sort of add value to the performance. And what you're thinking about here as well when you're talking about the range of language is not that they've not necessarily used it correctly. They haven't been able to carry out the word order, which brings up the point that was made as well about word order, because that's going to be dealt with in accuracy. You're looking here for an indication that they understand about the use of these words. So this candidate doesn't, as far as as I have been able to determine, use subordination. However, there are some other bits and bobs. She tries to use inversion, sometimes successfully, sometimes not, but we're going to look at that in accuracy. She uses coordination, so she's got aber und to extend her sentences. So I don't think you can actually say that her sentences are short. She does have longer sentences, and she also uses adjectives to extend her sentences. And she has really quite full sentences by and large, and some of them are more expanded. And she also uses a modal verb. So I think it would be quite harsh to say that the structures are limited or repetitive and that they're short sentences. The best fit is the adequate but predictable, having acknowledged that there isn't any subordination. But to say that it would be limited and repetitive would be very harsh, because there is some variety there, and there are sentences that are not short sentences. So on a best fit basis, you're looking at that adequate but predictable, which again is in the 3 to 4 band. But the fact that some of you are pulling down to that criterion below will give you an indication there that, because you've got to make a choice, haven't you, between 3 and 4, so it's giving you an indication that you're sort of pulling down towards the 3 mark. And the final grid then, the final poll rather more, is the use of tenses. So Mel, if you could bring that third grid up for me, on the use of different tenses or time frames, and I'll broadcast the results there. So the problem, I guess, here is that she doesn't use them in a very or frequent manner. That we had one example of it, and I would say that in that one example it was absolutely unambiguous. It was "Es hat geregnet viele," but it was a clear use of the past tense. So it is actually quite unambiguous, but it's somewhat thin. Nevertheless, it's definitely unambiguous, I think, and it would be wrong to say that there is no use. So I think that the band that you've put it in there of ambiguous no use is quite harsh. If the candidates have one use of the perfect tense, I think they have shown that they can do that perfect tense, and if it's unambiguous, then it will meet that one criterion. So what you have then across this range of language is a range. Can you minimize that again now, please, Mel? What you have then is that the range of vocabulary is just about adequate. It's very predictable, so you're sort of sitting in that 3 to 4 band there. For the structures and the subordination, you're saying that it's really, again, adequate but predictable, and there was quite a strong pull to the bottom of that band. And for the use of tenses, we're saying, well, what she's used is actually unambiguous, but there's not a great deal of evidence of it. So we decided there, as a best fit mechanism, that we would go for a mark of 3. So what I would say to you to take from this is the fact that the vocabulary should be considered as well. It isn't just the sort of structures, and it's absolutely not just the use of tenses. So just have a look at the comments there. So what if they use a lot of tenses but they're not all right? It's really to do with that lack of ambiguity in the use of tenses. So for example, if they were to say something like, oh, ich bin gehen, that is a very ambiguous use of tense, because you don't know actually from that ich bin gehen whether they're trying to use the past tense, or in fact whether they're trying to translate directly something like I am going. Whereas if they were to say something like ich habe gegangen, that's a very clear attempt to use a past tense, and we would all recognize it as such, but it's not correct, and that would then be dealt with in the accuracy grid. So for the range mark, you're looking at what is an unambiguous attempt, and I use that word there, then, an attempt at a past tense. And the Bouvin, you've said the candidate was limited using tenses by the limited questions from the TE. Now, that may well be so. We have to sort of go, though, on what we've heard, and perhaps the teacher felt that that wouldn't be the candidate's strong point. And if you read the grade descriptions in the specification for a grade C, you do not have to have candidates do not have to use the past tense or range of tenses in order to achieve a grade C. So that could have been a concerted effort on the part of the, or an informed decision, shall we say, on the part of the teacher to limit that to just the present tense in the main. But otherwise, that we have to sort of go on what we hear. And Kelly said, should we limit the questions if they included 1/10 to make sure they don't say anything that's incorrect? Well, again, you know your candidates. It would be, I don't think it would be right for me to say, yes, you should do that. I think it's you're going to know your candidates, and what's right for some may not be right for others. But just as I say, bear in mind that the great descriptions which you'll find in the specification say that they for a grade C in the speaking, they don't have to use a range of tenses. What it actually says is their performance may include different tenses. So think about that. The other thing that you might want to think about is that they don't have to use, when it talks about different tenses, it doesn't have to be past, present, future. It could just actually be different forms of the past. It could be, the perfect tense and the present tense. That's then a range of tenses. It doesn't have to have the future in as well. So you could limit that in that sense, if you like, if you knew they couldn't do a future. And remember that time frames are good as well. Okay, so I'm going to move then, ever conscious of the time, I'm going to move to the final activity in trying to get to grips with the assessment criteria, and this concerns the accuracy. And there are two things then here. The actual sort of accuracy in thinking about errors, and for this I'm going to pick up your point. You need to focus on communication. Do the errors that the candidate makes, do they impede communication? And you'll see different shades of that as you go through. If you feel that communication is achieved but there's a word order error, then it doesn't really make any difference in that sense, because communication is linked to the errors. So have a look at that, see what you think. There's also then I've focused on pronunciation and intonation, and sometimes again the pronunciation and intonation can impede the communication, so need to think a little bit about that. So okay, I'm just going to give you a few moments to think about that. Here think about, I've tried to transcribe, I know it's quite difficult to do without sort of listening to it, but I've tried to sort of transcribe how she sort of said things. So you have to sort of take it from me, if you like. Okay, so have a go, focus then perhaps more. As I say, you will be able to hear this because you've got it in your pack. So I'm just going to be quiet for a minute. Okay. We've had a question here from Bibovin again. Can we send a transcript of our candidate speaking to Edexcel in June 2013? You don't need to do that, because we're going to be listening to them. The idea here of having the transcript is for you to focus on picking the assessment criteria, really, rather than saying that you need to provide a transcript. Okay, so if we just make the accuracy errors grid poll, rather, Mel, can you make that a little bit bigger for me, if possible, please? Okay, I'm going to broadcast those results for you to see. So the majority of you feel that there are a fair number of errors, but actually communication is unaffected. And that's exactly what we felt was the case. One of the things that I would say to you is that as you sort of go up the accuracy grid, you'll see there it says that generally accurate, some errors, especially in more complex language. That presupposes that they've used complex language. So if you have given for the range a mark of something like 3, it is unlikely that you would give them a mark of 5 for the accuracy, because a mark of 3 for the range is saying that actually the range of structures they use is tending to the adequate but predictable, i.e. not complex. The range of lexis, the range of structures, is tending to the predictable, adequate but not complex. So they cannot therefore demonstrate errors in more complex language because they haven't used more complex language. So there is a kind of link-in between these two grids. So we felt that actually overall we could understand what this candidate said, and that therefore the communication was not impaired, it was unaffected, and therefore we felt that this fair number of errors but communication unaffected would be the most appropriate. Thinking about basic errors, just the grid some of you a couple of you selected there, many basic errors. Basic errors tend to be subject-verb disagreements, those kinds of things. So they are things that could start to impinge upon the communication. Potentially as well things like possessive adjectives. Adjective endings wouldn't really affect the communication, but if they got something like you know, ich habe sein Buch gelesen, we would actually not be quite clear on what was going on, unless from the context it had all been very clear, in which case it might have been excellent. So we did feel that it was a fair number of errors, and that's the 3 to 4 band. Now the pronunciation and intonation, obviously this is difficult for you to tap into, but I wanted to sort of bring this up as well because we would consider that. So when you're thinking about accuracy, so the reason I sort of put it there for you to think about is I think that quite often there's a focus on accuracy as being to what extent are there errors, but pronunciation and intonation do have an impact on the mark we award for accuracy, and therefore if you have candidates who pre-learn big chunks of material and recite it, the intonation is not good, is it? So that will be reflected, that flat tone, or where they, depending on how they've learnt it, they intonate in the wrong places, that will be reflected in the mark for pronunciation, intonation, accuracy. So although you obviously sort of voting in the dark, as it were, here, that's what I want you to think about for how we progress. So we're not going to listen to this one now. We're going to go on to a new one. So just to recap rather, we gave this candidate also 3 then for accuracy. So this candidate came out with 12.33, and you will have the recording of that, or you should have the recording of that to listen to at home or in centres or at home. Okay, so just going to whiz back and explain what we're going to do now. If that's okay. So we've done that activity there, and we're going to progress to our second activity where we're going to listen to some samples, and this time you haven't got the transcript, you're just going to listen to it. What you will have this time is the task, as you had before. You'll have the task and you'll have the assessment criteria, and then you have got the 3 polls. The 3 polls will refer to the content and response, the range of language, and the accuracy. So everything's there. Oh yes, so you've got the assessment criteria which you can control yourself. I hope that's the case, Mel. They should be able to control the assessment criteria themselves, the big grid there. At the bottom, you should have in the notes 7, you should have the task, and you've then got your 3 polls. What mark would you give for the content and response? What mark would you give for range of language, and what mark would you give for accuracy? So you can just mark those, you can just plonk your marks in whatever point is okay for you. And if there are any questions, then just ask them, and we're going to listen to it all the way through, and you just then give your marks when you're ready. Okay, so Mel, I'm going to be quiet, and you're going to play the sound file, please.
In der Nähe vom Chippenham.
Und wie heißt dein Dorf?
Mein Dorf heißt Littleton Drew.
Littleton Drew. Hast du immer in Littleton Drew gewohnt?
Nein, ich komme aus Hampshire. Als ich war 4, wir nach Littleton Drew.
Als du 4 Jahre alt warst?
Ja.
Und wie alt bist du jetzt?
Ich bin 6.
Also 12 Jahre in Littleton Drew.
Ja.
Und wie findest du dein Dorf?
Es ist sehr klein und ziemlich langweilig.
Warum?
Es gibt nichts.
Nichts?
Nichts. Aber ich gehe an den öffentlichen Verkehrsmittel zu Chippenham.
Mit dem Bus oder mit der Bahn?
Mit dem Bus. Für die Unterhaltungsmöglichkeiten.
Und was kann man als Jugendlicher in Chippenham machen?
Es gibt ein Kino, ein Sportzentrum mit dem Hallenbad und ein großes Einkaufszentrum.
Und was hättest du gerne in Chippenham?
Ich hätte es gern.
Open Interaction about wo wohnst du? Willkommen bei Schule International, bei Radioschule International. Wir begrüßen im Studio Ben. Hallo Ben.
Hallo.
Wie geht's?
Mir geht's gut, danke. Und dir?
Mir geht's auch gut, danke. Kannst du uns etwas über dich erzählen?
Ich bin ein Student. Ich bin in der 11. Jahre und ich lerne Geschichte, Mathematik, Naturwissenschaften, Deutsch und Sport. Geschichte ist mein Lieblingsfach. Momentum, wir lernen über den Krieg gegen Terrorismus.
Und findest du das interessant?
Ja, das ist sehr interessant.
Aha. Und wo ist das?
Ist in Nordwiltshire, in einer kleinen Stadt, heißt Chippenham. Wo wohnst du?
Ich wohne in Bielefeld. Das ist eine kleine Stadt im Nordwesten von Deutschland. Da ist auch meine Schule. Und hast du immer wohnst du in Chippenham?
Nein, ich wohne in ein kleines Dorf in der Nähe vom Chippenham.
Und wie heißt dein Dorf?
Mein Dorf heißt Littleton Drew.
Littleton Drew. Hast du immer in Littleton Drew gewohnt?
Nein, ich komme aus Hampshire. Als ich war 4, wir nach Littleton Drew.
Als du 4 Jahre alt warst?
Ja.
Und wie alt bist du jetzt?
Ich bin 6.
Also 12 Jahre in Littleton Drew.
Ja.
Und wie findest du dein Dorf?
Es ist sehr klein und ziemlich langweilig.
Warum?
Es gibt nichts.
Nichts?
Nichts. Aber ich gehe an den öffentlichen Verkehrsmittel zu Chippenham.
Mit dem Bus oder mit der Bahn?
Mit dem Bus. Für die Unterhaltungsmöglichkeiten.
Und was kann man als Jugendlicher in Chippenham machen?
Es gibt ein Kino, ein Sportzentrum mit dem Hallenbad und ein großes Einkaufszentrum.
Und was hättest du gerne in Chippenham?
Ich hätte es gern ein großer Kino. Auch ich würde lieber ein Zauberkino auch.
Zauberkino?
Ein Zauberkino, ja.
Was ist ein Zauberkino?
Ein Zaubererkino.
Ah, wie Zirkus?
Ja,
Ach so. Also lieber live als im Film.
ja.
Ach, guck mal an. Und was kann man hier in Wiltshire machen?
Da ist viel Orte in Wiltshire zu sehen.
Zum Beispiel?
Zum Beispiel Castle Coombe. Der neue Film vom Spielberg, Kriegfeld, gefilmt, wurden dort gemacht. Auch es ist sehr ruhig und wirklich sauber. Und man kann ein Green Tea bekommen.
Was ist das?
Ein Green Tea ist eine englische Teetasse mit ein süßes Brotchen mit Rosinen und Clotted Cream.
Also man trinkt eine Tasse Tee, man
Ja.
isst ein Brötchen mit Clotted Cream. Und
Ja.
was ist das?
Clotted Cream ist eine Art cremische Butter.
Okay, und das schmeckt lecker?
Ja,
Und
das
du-
ist sehr lecker.
Also du isst das gerne.
Ja.
Und was könnte ein deutscher Jugendlicher hier machen?
Ich würde mit einem deutschen Freund nach Bath gefahren mit dem Bahn. Ja, mit dem Bahn.
Und ja,
Wir könnten zu Kino besuchen.
und was wirst du nächstes Wochenende machen?
Nächstes Wochenende, ich bin nach London mit meiner Familie gefahren. Fahren.
Du fährst nächstes Wochenende nach London?
Ja,
Das ist eine große Stadt.
ja.
Und was wirst du machen?
Wir sind mit meinen großen Familien sehen.
Oh, deine Familie wohnt in London?
Ja,
Dann wünsche ich dir viel Spaß
ja.
und danke für das Interview.
Okay, I think most folks have had a chance to vote. Mel, can you make the top poll a bit bigger for me, please? And then I'll let folks see the marks. Okay, so I limited the choice of marks available, so that gave you a bit of a clue, really. So you can see here we've got one participant looking at a mark of 10. That's actually quite harsh. We've got quite a clump then around 12, 13, and we've got a couple of folks thinking that it's actually right in the top band. You'll see I didn't give you 18, so that gives you a clue that it's not worth 18. Okay, so I think we can say that just looking at that, most folks feel he's in that 12 to 15 band, and that's right. His performance was not really quite enough to go into the very top band. So I'll try and explain. You can write as many comments as you like, and if you want to share your thoughts. So the business about the stuff on school at the beginning. Well, I think if I defend the teacher in that. The task said you'll be interviewed for a German school magazine about the area where you live. So I think that was sort of really like trying to make it into a more realistic situation. So you're starting this broadcast and you're here and blah, blah, blah. So it's sort of that kind of thing. But then it does get on to the local area. And somebody, can't remember, was quite cynical there and said, get clever way of starting. That was B. Bovine. You said, oh, it's a clever way of starting with added planned spontaneity from the candidate. But actually, I did think that by and large throughout he was quite spontaneous. So we got on to his local area, and we got quite a lot of information. So it was quite detailed and quite relevant, I thought. I felt it did sound like a fairly genuine conversation. It wasn't really a question-answer session driven by the teacher. And I think it was at times very spontaneous. You felt that the teacher listened to what the candidate said and picked up on that and took it then further. He was quite confident, and somebody mentioned before that when you're looking at the transcript you can't see hesitation. I think you need to bear in mind with hesitation that in a truly spontaneous discussion there will be some hesitation because the candidate is been asked a question, is reflecting on what he wants to say. It's not hesitation in the extent that he needs prompting, and if you look at the grid, hesitation actually starts becoming more in line with sort of prompting or reliant on the teacher examiner to carry it through. And I don't think that you feel that he really needs the teacher examiner at all to keep it going. He's quite interactive. So where I did feel that he was a bit weak was on the opinions and sort of points of view. He had some very modest opinions, I felt. His favourite subject, the village, was quite boring. Not much to do there, so it wasn't really. We didn't have any sort of expansion there or justification, and as I think some of you has just have just written that he was fed some of this by the teacher. So we felt that it was in the 12 to 15 band, but we would actually go for a mark of 13. Now, I will just say on this matter, when we moderate, the concept or the idea behind the moderation is that we try to agree the teacher marks as far as possible. So in this case, for example, had you given a mark of 12, then I could accept a mark of 12. I personally think there's enough there to push him to a mark of 13 because I think there's enough information to warrant that. I think there is a little bit of hesitation. And the other thing I would say, thinking about the length of that oral, was that it was perhaps taken a little bit too long, and he started to sort of peter out a bit. He became a bit tired perhaps, and things started to sort of fall apart. The business about going to London and stuff, that started to sort of become a weak point. But you have to mark the whole thing globally. So he may start off more strongly and become a bit weaker at the end. But you have to sort of take that all together. Now, I can read your comments, and what I would say to you is that you're always going to have to come up with a best fit mark, because the grids, the bands, if you like, the bands within the grids have got 6 or 7 or whatever criteria there. So it is unlikely that a candidate is going to meet each and every one of those criteria. So sometimes they sort of ease into the band above for one of them, sometimes they're in the band below, so you're looking for a best fit. So we felt that here the best fit for this candidate in terms of the content and response would be a mark of 13. So if we can minimize that poll again, Mel, and then I'm going to look at the range of language grid if we could. Oh, I don't know, can I do that? Move that, yep. Okay, so can we expand the, oh, I've gone mad. Right, so there we have the mark for range of language. I don't know how to do this bit, as you can see. So the mark for range of language, again, you can see the majority vote is in the 3 to 4 band. A couple of you felt that it was worth a mark of 5. Well, don't think it is worth quite a mark of 5. And I go back to what I sort of said to you before, really. Think about the vocabulary that he used. The vocabulary is no more than adequate, actually. I mean, it is adequate for the test, but it's no more than that. It's actually quite high frequency lexis. So if you think about, you know, it's langweilig and interessant, and somebody said as well that he uses the word clotted cream in English, and he can sort of explain that okay, but so we felt that the range of vocabulary was perhaps a little bit of a restricting factor. His range of structures is actually not that great either. There is an as clause, but there are no examples of modal verbs or infinitive constructions, and that's, you know, perhaps something you want to sort of think about. In the specification there is a list of grammatical structures which is common to all awarding bodies actually, and if you look in there you'll see that there are things like relative clauses, modal verbs, comparative, superlative, all kinds of things really. And his is, again, it tends more to be the predictable rather than, you know, if you look into the 5 band, it's sort of saying it's a good variety, and I don't think there really is a good variety there. So we felt that he does attempt to use past tense there, but there is a bit of ambiguity arising from that, in fact. So we felt the mark of 4 here was better. It's better than 3, and sometimes, you know, if you're looking at this 3 and 4 band and you say, well, you know, which way round is it? If you're looking at 3, then it implies that you're looking down towards the 2, doesn't it? Whereas this is not looking at all towards the 2, so the mark of 4 would be best. Okay, so we gave 13 4, and then for the accuracy, Mel, I've messed up all the polls. Could you possibly make the 3rd one? Thank you very much, and I'm sorry that I messed it up. You've got here, then I broadcast those so you can see, again, we're all in that sort of 3 to 4 band, and we felt that thinking about to what extent the accuracy leads to this impairment of communication, we felt that actually they didn't impinge on the communication, that there were a fair number of errors in general, and this error that I mentioned to you before about the use of trying to make the English present continuous in German, but you know that never works really. So we felt that this was also worth a 4. And there were really, I think, no sort of problems with communication, but there was such a high frequency of error. So we gave that candidate 1344, which comes out with a total of 21. And if you think about the grade boundaries, because that's what people do want to think about, if he had 2 pieces of work of a similar standard, that would have given him a grade B. So grade B was 38 and grade A was 44, so he would have come out with 42. So he's quite a solid B, and could do just a little bit more to get himself a grade A. Okay, so we're going to look at we're going to listen to this one on holidays. So this is a presentation and discussion on holidays, and the tasks are given to you exactly as they were given to us by the teachers. So any sort of errors there or errors from the centre. So exactly the same procedure, except it's a different task type. This is a presentation and discussion task. You have got the same grids, put your marks in and do the same thing. Okay, thanks very much then, Mel.
And she's going to do a presentation on holidays. Ja, guten Tag, Olivia.
Guten Tag.
Guten Tag, ja. Bitte, du könntest jetzt deine Präsentation beginnen.
Ich liebe Ferien, weil sie mir die Gelegenheit geben, etwas anderes zu machen. Zum Beispiel habe ich Karatetage gemacht, als ich nach Australien geflogen bin. Ich fühle mich auch sehr entspannt, besonders wenn wir zu einem sonnigen Ort gehen und die Sonne jeden Tag scheint. Oft fahren wir mit einigen Freunden. Es ist eine völlig andere Erfahrung, aber wir arbeiten dort komplett. Letztes Jahr bin ich mit meiner Familie und einer anderen englischen Freundin nach Mallorca gefahren. Die Ferien waren sehr gut und wir haben uns richtig gut amüsiert. Wir haben viel Zeit im Schwimmbecken verbracht und wir sind am Strand gefahren. Obwohl wir viel Zeit zusammen verbracht haben, haben wir auch etwas viel Zeit getrennt gemacht. Das ist sehr wichtig. Ich habe wirklich schöne Ferien gehabt, aber ich habe auch sehr schlechte Ferien gehabt. Zum Beispiel vor 3 Jahren bin ich mit meiner Familie nach Schottland gefahren. Zunächst wollten wir nach Isle fahren und wir haben das Schiff verpasst. Es war sehr ärgerlich, weil das nächste Schiff erst eine Stunde später war. Als wir in dem Haus angekommen sind, hat das Haus keinen Strom gehabt, so ein Pech. Wenn du zu einem wirklich netten Ort gehst, willst du nie abfahren. Ich denke, dass dies passieren könnte, wenn ich nach Mallorca fahre. In diesem Sommer werde ich wieder nach Mallorca fahren und die Villa sieht sehr schön aus. Auch werde ich nach Italien mit der großen Familie nach Italien fahren. Und es wird viel Spaß machen, weil wir seit 5 Jahren nicht auf Ferien zusammengegangen sind. In der Zukunft möchte ich nach Amerika fahren, vielleicht New York besuchen. Und ich möchte neue Erfahrungen, die ich nie vergessen werde. Oft sind Ferien nicht entspannend, aber man macht eine Erfahrung, die nie vergessen wird.
Ja, das ist richtig, ja. Ja. Viele Dinge wird man nie vergessen, ja, du hast recht, ja. Sag mal, du warst also in Australien, das ist ja super. Wo warst du da? Und mit wem bist du da hingefahren? Mit wem warst du da?
Vor 3 Jahren bin ich mit meiner Familie nach Sydney gefahren.
Ja.
Wir sind in den Osterferien mit dem Flugzeug geflogen.
Aha, das heißt, du warst also in Sydney, ja?
Ja.
Und hast du da in einem Hotel gewohnt oder auf dem Campingplatz, oder?
Nein, wir sind in einem Hotel geblieben.
Ja, gut, ja.
Ja.
Und was hast du dort während des Tages oder so am Abend gemacht?
Wir haben viele Sehenswürdigkeiten gesehen und wir sind in einem botanischen Garten gebummelt. Am letzten Abend haben wir ein Ballett im Open House von Sydney gesehen. Es war spektakulär.
Das ist ja toll, das Opernhaus in Sydney, das hast du gesehen?
Ja.
Ja, hast du auch viele Fotos gemacht?
Ja, viele Fotos, ja.
Ja. Und was hat dir so an diesem Urlaub am besten gefallen? Was waren so die besten Momente?
Sydney ist so wunderbar, die Leute sind sehr freundlich und ich liebe Einkaufen.
Aha.
Und die Geschäfte waren spektakulär.
Ja. Wie war denn das Wetter?
Das Wetter war sehr schön, obwohl Herbst war.
Ja.
Herbst war.
Ja.
Das Wetter war das Wetter sehr gut.
Toll, ja, super. Ja. Und welche Pläne hast du denn schon für deinen Italienurlaub?
Wir haben es wird flexibel sein.
Ja, flexibel, das ist wichtig, ja.
Und deshalb werden wir am Morgen entscheiden.
Aha, ja.
Aber wir nicht in der Nähe der Küste.
Aha, also ihr wohnt nicht in der Nähe?
Deshalb werden wir mit dem Auto zum Strand fahren.
Ja, ja, natürlich. Und also der Strand ist nicht so weit, hoffentlich, ne?
Oh nein.
Ja, das wird toll sein. Ja, sag mal, wohin würdest du fahren, wenn du sehr, sehr, sehr viel Geld hättest, wenn du super reich wärst?
Wenn ich viel Geld hätte, würde ich nach Amerika fahren.
Ja, ja.
Zum Beispiel liebe ich Boston.
Aha, ja.
Deshalb würde ich nach Boston besuchen.
Mhm. Hast du Boston schon einmal besucht?
Nein, ich habe noch nie nach Boston fahren.
Ah, das ist ja interessant. Ja, also ich hoffe, du wirst bald nach Boston fahren können. Ja? Dankeschön. End of test.
Okay, so if you just give your marks. I was trying to read some of. I'll sort of talk while you're putting your marks in. I was trying to read some of your comments. Some of you have said about the teacher's performance, and the fact of the matter is we can't really do anything about that. We have to moderate the oral based on what we hear of the candidate. So if you feel that the teacher is feeding him information, or the teacher is being sort of irritating by repeating information or something, then there's actually nothing that we can do about these. I'm giving you these samples to to sort of look at the marking, and we have that is just the way they come to us, as it were. So these things happen, really. I'm just going to say as well about the presentation. Somebody asked how long do we recommend the presentation should be. Well, the specification says that the presentation must last a minimum of 1 minute. And it can last a maximum of 3. This is very important, that you start timing the candidate's presentation from the point at which the candidate starts giving it, because there are some marking principles that you need to think about. And if the presentation falls below the minimum time requirement of 1 minute, then there will be 2 marks. 2 marks will be taken from the content and response. So if you have had some problems with your marks, it could well be that one or two or so of your presentations were a bit short. And this particular candidate here, for example, gives a presentation of 2 minutes 30 and has really quite a bad moment at just under a minute when she starts to sort of falter. Now, how long it should be? Well, you have to think about these criteria. Again, the presentation will allow the candidate to give detailed, relevant information. It will allow them to express opinions, ideas, points of view, but it won't allow them to interact. It won't allow them to speak spontaneously, and it won't allow them to deal with unpredictable elements. So that if you are going to go for a presentation that is sort of 2.5 minutes, you need to make sure then that the discussion part of it also lasts a fair amount of time, because you need to make sure your candidate has the opportunity to fulfill these criteria. I've been told that it's 5:30, so I'd like to do this one and play one more sample, so I'm going to sort of whiz through a little bit more quickly than I might have liked. So if we can enlarge, please, the first poll, Mel, if that's at all possible, so that I can then show people what marks were going on. If you could enlarge that. This candidate, I think most people have, no, we're not going to have, are we having an enlarged poll, Mel? Most people, from what I can see, have put this in the top band. 16, we've got 9 on, there we are, thank you, thanks. We've got 9 on 16, 5 on 17 and 2 on 18. Well, again, bearing in mind, you know, what I said, we felt that this was really a mark of 16, definitely in the top band. You've got to take into account the presentation as well as the discussion, and so that there were some points at which sort of faltered a little bit, but the discussion perhaps gives a better indication of her true ability, and so in this case perhaps the shorter presentation would have been better. So this candidate was the centre gave a mark of 16, and we could confirm that mark, and we felt that it sort of represented her performance quite well. If you gave a mark of 14, I think it might be fair to say you're being a bit harsh there, really, because this candidate gives opinions and so on and so forth. Okay, can we swap to the second grid down then, please, Mel? I'm going to broadcast those results as well. So the candidate here, in her presentation, she certainly uses a good range of lexis, and she's got things like ärgerliche Erfahrung and so on, and she does also use quite a good range of structures, quite a good variety of structures there. There's inversion and subordination. To go back to that, she uses weil and obwohl, and she does use in a couple of tenses as well, quite accurately. So perfect tense, future tense, and she brings in some reflexive verbs. When you get to the discussion, it's actually not quite as good. So although she's, in terms of the response, she's better in the discussion, the range of language is actually not as convincing. So in fact here we gave her a mark of 5. So she can, you know, because you have to take this sort of globally, so that you're saying the presentation is good. There's a good use of language there, but then in the discussion, which also counts, the best fit would be a mark of 5. And to go then to the accuracy, if we can switch grids, please, Mel. The mark for accuracy, I'll just broadcast those results there as well. You can see then that again the majority vote on the accuracy is with the 5, although quite a few of you were tempted by the mark of 6. We actually went with the mark of 5 as well. So there are some basic errors here actually. Ich wird, for example, and some incomplete sentences. And you'll have an opportunity to go back and to listen to this again, but there were some parts as well of thinking about pronunciation and intonation. Her enunciation of certain words in the presentation actually was a little bit dodgy, and you couldn't actually understand what she was saying. So there are a few bits that do impede the communication, but taken overall, a mark of 5 was felt to be the correct mark. So this candidate came out with 16.55, which I'm able to do that sum. That's 26, and that means therefore that this candidate is an A star, because the A star was 50 over the 2 tasks. So this candidate came out with an A star on that performance. Okay, so we're going to do one more. Sorry for sort of going so quickly, but it'd be good if we could do this one. Now, we should have a picture for this one, Mel. Have we got a picture that I was going to show folks first of all, or has that picture disappeared? It's a picture-based discussion. I wanted you to have one of all the three. There it is. There you've got the candidate's picture, and you can see she's written that it's Chester. On the picture-based discussion, if you bear in mind that they can start with a presentation if they wish, the presentation may last up to a minute, no longer than a minute, but they don't have to. They can go straight into the discussion. Okay, so I'm going to take that picture away. I hope you've all been able to assimilate all the information in that. It's essentially a picture of Chester, and we're going to play this oral and you do your marking. Okay, Mel, thanks very much.
Okay, kannst du das Foto beschreiben?
Ich wohne in Mancot, in einem Doppelhaus in Mancot in Nordostwales. Mancot ist in der Nähe von Chester. In Chester es gibt viel gut geschafft und gut Kaufhäuser. Es gibt mit den Dom und Geschäften zu besichtigen. Es gibt viel zu tun.
Okay, was gibt es in Chester?
Ich weiß.
Okay, es gibt den Dom, du hast gesagt, es gibt den Dom und Geschäfte. Was noch?
Es gibt Friseursalon.
Ja.
Und Kneipen.
Ja.
Und Bahnhof und Pferdrennbahn.
Okay. Fein. Und du wohnst in Mancot, ja. Wo liegt Mancot? Wo liegt Mancot?
Mancot ist in der Nähe von Chester.
Und kannst du dein Haus beschreiben?
Mein Haus ist modern und mittelgroß.
Okay. Kannst du Mancot beschreiben?
Mancot ist ein kleines Dorf von Chester.
Und was kann man in Mancot machen?
Man kann in Park Fußball spielen.
Spielst du gern Fußball? Was sind die Vorteile von deinem Wohnort?
Mancot ist ruhig und nicht so gefährlich.
Und gibt es Nachteile?
Es gibt nicht für junge Leute.
Und wie findest du deinen Wohnort?
Ich finde Mancot manchmal langweilig.
Okay. Wohnst du lieber in der Stadt oder auf dem Lande?
Ich würde gern in Großstadt wohnen.
Okay. Und was gibt es in Chester für Jugendliche? Okay. Was gibt es für Touristen?
Man kann mit Man kann mit Chester mit dem Bus.
Und wann warst du zum letzten Mal in Chester?
Ich war letzte Wochenende in Chester.
Und was hast du gemacht?
Ich gemacht und T-Shirt und Blau Jeans.
Okay. Und wie findest du Chester?
Ich finde Chester ruhig.
Okay. Und wie wäre deine ideale Stadt?
Mein ideale Stadt würde es gibt Friseursalon, Bahnhof und Präsidentenbahn.
Okay, wir sind fertig.
Okay, that was rather an abrupt ending on that one. Okay, so I know some of you are still voting, but can we expand that first poll, Mel, please? And then I'll publish the results of that for people to see. So I'll broadcast them rather more. Okay, so again, I limited the marks so that you'd have an idea, and nobody's been tempted by those ones up the top. So quite a lot of people are being quite harsh with this candidate, thinking that she's in that 4 to 7 band. And again, thinking back to those criteria that sort of tried to pinpoint before, if you think about the amount of information that she gave, I don't think it was limited information, and that's what you're saying. If you're putting her in the 4 to 7 band, you're saying that it's limited information. I think that it is relevant information, and I would then be thinking of the 8, 9, 10, 11 band in terms of the amount of information given. The interaction, well, I don't think it's really good interaction. She doesn't interact well. There is a little bit of interaction, but I didn't feel that she knew exactly what questions were coming. It wasn't in the sense of it had all been pre-rehearsed like that. So I felt that there was some interaction. The opinions are very limited, really, but there are a couple. So I think that actually we're going into this 8 to 11 band, but you certainly wouldn't be looking at the 10 or 11 end of things, because that would imply that you were sort of thinking that she's going to be moving up to the next grid. So I think there is enough for her to sneak into the 8, 9 area, and again confirming centre marks, that this came out with a mark of 9. So you've been quite harsh on this one, and try and pick out again, as I said to you before, those criteria to focus on them, and we felt that there was enough here for her to come with a mark of 9. If we can have a look at the range of language, and she's not dependent on the prompting. She doesn't really need prompting. Once or twice she has a moment, but otherwise she can answer the question quite fully. So for the range of language, sorry, I'll just broadcast those marks. Okay. So you can see then that a lot of people are going for a mark of 2. Some of you have gone for a mark of 3. one of the problems really is with the fact that you've only got 6 marks, if you like, to go from grade G all the way to grade A star. And if you say that this candidate has a limited and repetitive range of vocabulary, that's and structures, that's not really true. She does have some tendency to repetitive. Es gibt, for example, gut, klein, and so on. And but there are some other bits that stand out a little bit more. So you've got besichtigen, ruhig, gefährlich, and so I think that from a vocabulary point of view, I'd be quite happy to go into the 3. So if I think about the structures, they are. She tends to use fairly sort of simple sentences, but she does also use und to coordinate, and we shouldn't play that down. She does still use und to coordinate. She does attempt modal verbs, so man kann. There is conditional in there, imperfect, perfect tense. So perhaps when you go back and listen to it, you might appreciate it a bit more. So in fact, we felt that there was enough here to be worth a mark of 3. And the final one, and on your pack, in the pack that you download, you should have access to one that does have a mark of 2 for the range of language, and I hope you could see the difference. And so, Mel, if we could go for the final grid, please, the accuracy grid, so that I can just show everybody the results for that. Again, sort of split between 2 and 3. And more of you sort of favouring the 2 than 3. Again, think about a lot of what she says is actually accurate, and we don't feel there's any sort of negative impact on the communication, and her pronunciation and intonation is actually okay. It's more than just understandable. It is by and large okay. So this candidate came out with a mark of 3. So she came out altogether with 933, which is a mark of 15. And in terms of the grade boundaries, that would have given. I've read some of your comments. Some of you have been saying, you know, your marks came out lower than you wanted. One of the things I would say that you might want to consider is perhaps looking at some of the marking principles. So, for example, if you're doing an open interaction task, which I'm going to show you now, actually, an open interaction task. On the open interaction task, we're not going to have time to do this properly, unfortunately, but on this task here, an open interaction task, which is a task created by a centre for their students, you can see that it says here, make sure, I don't know if I can get that thing to work. No, I was going to try doing that pointy job, but I can't. I'm not. Oh, there it is. Make sure you ask your friend at least 2 questions. If they don't ask the questions in the open interaction task, you've put that, and they don't ask questions, then there will be, again, 2 marks will be taken from the content and response grid. And so, again, if they don't produce a presentation in the presentation and discussion, then they would have 2 marks taken off if they don't hit the 1-minute mark. So I obviously can't address all of your queries about the marking, because I haven't marked all of yours, and I just can't in any case. But I think those marking principles may be something to think about, and also then your task, how your task is set up, could possibly have an impact. And I'm sort of asking you a couple of questions, really. Is it a good task, and why is it a good task? And if I can get rid of that green arrow, there we go. So this was a task set for by a centre for the students, their own students. And this task, I just want to talk a little bit about the open interaction task. This has a stimulus here, if you can see the bit on the left-hand side of the page, that is what we refer to as a stimulus. And Kelly said it breaks the rules for the number of words. Well, in fact, the number of words is 70. So that bit on the right side of the page should be 70 words, and this is actually the full 70. I mean, it does look quite a lot, you're right, but it does fall right within the limit. But one of the things you could do, and that's sort of talking about how it could be improved, or how could you use it, oops-a-daisy, how could you use it, perhaps better vary the style. One of the queries there says how you would vary the style of the task. You could actually have more pictures, more images, because there is no limit on that. So it could well be that for some candidates they respond more readily to having pictures rather than words. And if you are thinking of doing an open interaction, it's perhaps a good idea to have a stimulus, because it gives the students, during that oral, it gives the students something to rely on. They don't have to use this, but this information, they don't have to stick to it rigidly, but it is there for them. And then just thinking about the actual situation, this says then you're given a specific context, if you like, so that they know they're playing a role and you're playing a role. And good would be here under the task bit to say you might be covering the following points. I'm sure you're aware of that. So you might be covering the following points, because then you give them the option to not to cover actually some of those points, because as long as it's sort of about travel and tourism, which is what this says it is, then it's okay. They can perhaps focus on bullet points 1, 3 and 4 or something, and those are the ones they felt, so they don't have to cover them all. And that is true for both the presentation discussion and the picture-based discussion task, that it's good to have some bullet points there to guide the candidates, to guide the students through, that it's nice for them to have some sort of anchor, if you like. One of the other things you might think about is that you don't have to have the same task for all your students, and one of the boxes below says, you know, how could you vary the style of each task so it's not the same for each candidate. You can differentiate the task. So you could have a bit more support in some, a bit more open-ended for others. And think about as well what I said, that it talks about ideas and points of view as opposed to just opinions. So if you've got students that you want to go for, keep going back to the criteria really. So if you've got students that you want to push towards the top bands, you need to make sure that the task that you're setting will allow them to do that. So I haven't we're sort of running out of time here really, so if you've got any questions about the task, I'm quite happy to go into that. But one of the I'm going to just sort of go back to the presentation, and it sort of says, because you should have, again in your pack you should have that, why is Bristol Zoo a good task? Well, it's about what they know. It's about their own environment. So it was set presumably by a school in near Bristol, so it's relevant to them, but it allows scope for expansion. And the other thing that it allows scope for is questions that will encourage spontaneity, elaborate response and unpredictable elements. And I'm just going to pick up on that last point, because I saw one of the questions in the chat box said, what exactly is an unpredictable element? You can it's still got to be something that's on the topic. It shouldn't be something completely random. It can be something that you know that you have covered with your students, but it just isn't actually listed on the task. So if you think about the task as being the title and then the sequence of bullet points, 5 or 6 or whatever, 4, 5, 6, whatever you're going to have, then the unpredictable elements just would be something that isn't listed there really. So you want to have, in order for it to be sort of to generate elaborate responses, you want the task to be sort of quite open-ended as well. So that's really sort of all we've got time for, I'm afraid. But I'm going to be here, so you can ask me any questions you want. And just as a sort of final point, then, really, that you can do all your teaching and set your task to arise from that context that you've taught them, and hopefully then that will lead to good results. So any questions, I'm going to be here, and I think Mel is going to come in now and do a poll or something. So Mel, I'm going to hand over to you.